when it comes to the Romeo Doubs trade rumors, this is a whole lot of smoke and maybe no fire.
You are Locked On Packers, your daily Green Bay Packers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Packers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Peter Bukowski, and I cover the Packers for The Leap, a newsletter I would love for you to subscribe to. Follow me on Twitter, Peter_Bukowski. Follow the podcast on Twitter, Locked On Packers. Like us on Facebook. Subscribe to the podcast to iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, wherever you find podcasts, you'll find Locked On Packers, the #1 Packers podcast on the internet. And the show for fans who know what happened, they want to know why and how. Thanks to everyone who makes Locked On Packers their first listen every day. We hope you like starting your day with us as much as we like starting our day with you. This episode brought to you by our friends at Amazon Fire TV Stick 4K. Turn any TV into your Xbox. No console needed. Head to Amazon.com/Fire TV Locked On to learn more. The Romeo Doubs trade rumors, which we've talked a little bit about, started almost immediately after the draft. The Packers use a first-round pick on Matthew Golden. They use a third-round pick on Jadeveon Williams. And people can do the math. They can see there's only so many bodies to go around. And Andrew Filipponi, who is a Pittsburgh radio host, suggested that the Steelers have called on Romeo Doubs. Albert Breer was, reporting is overstating it, but quote tweeted a post about this and suggested, look, Aaron Rodgers is a big fan of Romeo Doubs. I don't know if that's totally true. That was true at one point. I don't know if it ended the season in 2022. True. I don't know if Aaron Rodgers was a huge fan of Romeo Doubs, if he would have left Green Bay, frankly, if he was that big a fan of Romeo Doubs. That being said, right now, I don't think there's any traction to any of this. I think it would make some sense, but it only makes sense in August. Now, I do think it made sense day 3 if a team was going to give up a 4th-round pick. But a 4th-round pick now is really a 5th-round pick. Like the George Pickens trade, a 3rd-round pick 2 weeks after the draft is really seen as a future pick. And the NFL, whether they're right or wrong, and I think they're frankly mostly wrong to view it this way, but the NFL has traditionally viewed that pick that far out as a round discount. So a 3rd round today is really worth a 4th rounder when the draft comes around. That's really what the value is because it's so far away. You can't help your team now today. And so that's problematic, theoretically. So had the Packers used Romeo Doubs on day 3 of the draft and said, hey, here is a 4th round pick, for example, now, then I could have seen it. But even then, that would have stretched what I think is a reasonable expectation for this Packers team because, walk with me a moment, we know Jadeveon Williams is an explosive athlete, dangerous with the ball in his hand, can make these incredible highlight reel plays, but he has not, for any stretch of time, been a consistent boundary receiver. Matthew Golden has never been. One season at Texas, and he didn't even have 60 catches as a boundary receiver, and he played in the slot, some at Texas as well. You're relying on 2 rookies to step in and immediately perform for you, where your only other option really is Dontavian Wicks, and then 2 guys we saw in the Philadelphia playoff game that were just not good enough, Malik Heath and Bo Melton. Like, those guys are nice 4th, 5th receivers. Let's just take this to the NBA playoffs. Very timely right now. In Cleveland, Ty Jerome was an unbelievable 6th man this last year. Unbelievable in 20 minutes a game. Darius Garland goes out. In the playoffs, he's got to play 35 minutes a game, and it's been a mess. It's not even just like more minutes means less efficient. No, it's been a nightmare. You can't just extrapolate and say, okay, Bo Melton's a really good wide receiver 5, which he is. therefore he's good wide receiver 2 insurance. That's not how this works. Bo Melton and Malik Heath are very useful players when you have Romeo Doubs, Christian Watson, and Dontavian Wicks already out there, but you don't. Christian Watson is not going to be available until Halloween at the earliest. More likely not going to look like himself November, December, probably not even, frankly, probably 2026. Can you afford to move on from Romeo Doubs now when you don't have any idea what you're getting from your 2 rookies? And all you have is Dontavian Wicks, who was inconsistent last year and has been hurt in his 2 years in the NFL. I also did a study. I wrote about this today for The Leap, a newsletter I would love for you to subscribe to. That when you look at the 3rd and longs that the Packers converted this year, far and away the most targeted receiver in successful 3rd down conversions was Romeo Doubs. Like, far and away. I think he had as many as all the other receivers combined. So that tells you where he is on critical downs and distances when the Packers have had their issues, at least last year, against the best teams. Can you afford to just say, no, we'll just take whatever? Unless you're going to get the George Pickens deal, and I don't think you're going to get the George Pickens deal, but I do want to dilate on that for a second. I had this discussion with Wendell Fajeda, our pal, on the X Machine yesterday or 2 days ago. George Pickens gets a 3rd round pick, but George Pickens is a headache. He is a player that became so toxic that the Pittsburgh Steelers, who just major in toxic players and find a way to make them productive, and then they move on and they go on and they're not good anywhere else but Pittsburgh. They want to get rid of him. And then if he's good or even decent in Dallas, you're going to have to pay him. He's going to want to get $25 million a year. So that's built into the draft capital cost. There is a value in a player like Romeo Doubs, who is solid, just rock steady solid, and who's probably only going to want 10, 12, $15 million a year. That difference, that delta is enormous. And there is value there. The problem is if you get a 4th round pick now and you build in this discount that we think teams use, then that's really a 5th round pick. And then it's like, well, in a year, you could get a 5th round pick compensatory pick for Romeo Doubs. So why not just have him now? Unless he was a headache last year too, and we just don't know the full extent of that. We don't have real reporting about that. We know what happened with the suspension the first time. In fact, we over at The Leap reported about what that was all about. And it's even, there's a lot of things to navigate there. And now you're bringing in, he was worried about his carries or his touches then, and now you're going to bring in 2 new receivers. If you think that's going to get a little ugly, then I can just see, look, addition by subtraction. But it's not a move you can make until August. Now, here's the good part. If that is where they land, the Steelers can be patient, because if they're going to trade for Romeo Doubs because of Aaron Rodgers, the whole deal is that you're trading for Romeo Doubs because he knows Aaron Rodgers, because Aaron Rodgers likes Romeo Doubs and they have a rapport. You don't need training camp. You don't need the reps. So you can wait until the Packers get a sense of, hey, where are these guys? You go through mandatory minicamp. You go through 2 weeks of training camp. And then you go, hey, these guys are ready. Like Matthew Golden looks ready today to be a dude, to be a guy. And they knew pretty right away that Romeo Doubs was going to come in and immediately contribute for this team. And he did. Now he never, built on that. The trajectory was not quite there, but they got a lot out of Romeo Doubs, especially as a day 3 pick. It fits with the Packers timeline and the Steelers timeline to wait. So for the moment, I don't see this happening. And frankly, I don't see this happening unless and until we get to the trade deadline and these guys are killing it. that Dontavian Wicks has taken a step forward, that Matthew Golden looks like a real dude, that Savion Williams is at least showing signs that he can become a boundary receiver, that maybe Tucker Kraft takes a little bit of a step, and you're just like, well, there's too many balls. Pause. There's too many players who are going to want the rock, and too many players who deserve it. And so then you can make a move like that. That makes the most sense. This is not an issue right now. But the Packers do have an issue with Jaire Alexander. I know I said I wasn't going to do as the Jaire Alexander turned, but two major plugged-in reporters weighed in, and they see this the same way. They see a resolution coming soon, and they seem to see that resolution the same way. We'll talk about it next on Locked On Packers. Did you know your Fire TV is also an Xbox? Turn any TV into your gaming and entertainment hub with Fire TV Stick 4K devices. No console required. Just grab your paired controller, subscribe, or sign into Xbox Game Pass Ultimate with EA Play included, and you're ready to go. Dive into hundreds of premium titles, including EA Sports College Football 25 to Call of Duty, as easily as you stream your favorite shows. Already have a console? A Fire TV Stick 4K device is more affordable and easier to travel with, allowing you to take you or your kids' games wherever you plug in. Plus, everything's in one place with Netflix, YouTube, and so much more. Head to Amazon.com/Fire TV Locked On to get started. Xbox Game Pass Ultimate subscription and compatible controller is required. Available on select devices, including Fire TV Stick 4K 2nd Gen, Fire TV Stick 4K Max 1st and 2nd Gen, and Fire TV Cube 3rd Generation. It's looking more and more like Jaire Alexander is going to be a member of the Green Bay Packers. First, it was Jeremy Fowler with the old non-reporting reporting. Did not attribute it to sources, but does the thing. We've talked about it a bunch on this show, where a plugged-in reporter, and look, I may or may not have done this before, where someone says, hey, it looks like this thing is going to happen. Here's one way it could play out. And you do that because you are confident, based on what you've been told off the record or whatever it is, that it's going to play out that way. Jeremy Fowler suggested that it is looking like the Packers and Jaire Alexander are going to work this out. There's going to be some sort of resolution. And then he posits that a sensible outcome would be a reduction in that base salary, maybe with some incentives. We've talked about it, right? And it does make sense. Then Peter Schrager goes on Pat McAfee and says, I talked to Matt LaFleur. I asked him about it, and he said, we're in a much better place with Jaire Alexander. And, we know he's been doing the offseason work. I don't want to extrapolate too far here because then I'm doing the thing that I said I was not going to do. But when you have two reporters like this, being this confident that this is the way that this is going to happen, you have to take notice. And when it comes to separations between two teams, reporters tend to be very, very bet hedging about this stuff. You cannot predict a breakup unless you have it pretty well sourced in terms of I think this is going to happen as a newsbreaker, as a Jeremy Fowler, as a Peter Schrager. You got it. They're very careful about tea leaf reading. They have stuff sourced usually. Now, that's not true of everybody. But guys like Fowler, guys like Schrager, they are talking with information that they have in situations like this. And in the case of Peter Schrager, he is directly attributing it to Matt LaFleur. Matt LaFleur could have told him, look, he's not going to be here. We're not doing this. And the posturing from the team, Brian Gutekunst and Matt LaFleur, has kind of been like that. But so for Matt LaFleur to say that to Peter Schrager is interesting. And that it may mean some of the public comments are meant for an audience of one or, two, like Jaire and his representatives. Oh, yeah, we're working through that. We're figuring that out. They can't say, actually, we're in a really good place with Jaire Alexander and we're going to welcome him back with open arms, because guess what you do when you do that? You have now given up the leverage, and Jaire Alexander's camp can go to him and say, hey, look, you said I'm coming back. So what are the fans going to think if you come back and say, well, actually. So I suppose you can make the case that Brian Gutekunst and Matt LaFleur do not benefit from being open about this, except that Traeger said, I don't think Matt LaFleur would mind me saying, he said that they're in a much better place. Now, I suppose if you want to play devil's advocate here, you could say, well, we're in a much better place from a terrible place. Like maybe I'm in a better place with Bears fans than I was during the season, let's say. Well, I'm still probably not in a great place with them, but it's better than it was during the season, maybe. It probably isn't, frankly. Like, I don't know. But there is that nuance if you wanted to get into the weeds that way. That would be pretty disingenuous to frame it that way, though. And I just don't see the value in doing that. I'd like who benefits from you phrasing it that way if you're trying to cover it. That it's just that doesn't make sense. So I said I wasn't going to like do the daily vicissitudes of Jaire Alexander, and I'm not. And I didn't do it when just Jeremy Fowler. But now it's Jeremy Fowler and Peter Schrager, and we have actual reporting on this now from the coach. So, for the moment, we are again going to table this discussion because I don't know what the value is of continuing to speculate and wonder and hey, what's going on and what could this look like? I don't think that there's value in that. Like, they're going to reduce the money that he's making. Maybe they'll put in incentives in his contract. Maybe they won't. Maybe they'll lop a year off so he can become a free agent after this season. Maybe they won't. It doesn't really matter right now. And I think, frankly, we get a little too bogged down in some of that stuff. I think sometimes, and I'm guilty of this certainly, but I think the way the coverage of the salary cap and the whole idea of value, everyone wants to be, a value investor now when it comes to players. Well, if you're not getting plus EV on all these contracts, then they're bad contracts. Or like you're so worried about all of that stuff. And this is the royal you. Physician, heal thyself. I'm talking about me too. Jaire Alexander, if he's healthy, the contract that he's currently playing on is totally a fine deal. And if they don't reduce the contract that much, it's not that big a deal. It really isn't. The Packers have the money. They'll be fine. So I don't know that it's useful to anybody to go through the scenarios of like, okay, well, he could take a $4 million pay cut. And if he takes a $4 million pay cut, that means they have X amount of dollars. Like, come on. Is that really what we're going to sit here and do in early May? Is speculate on how much money Jaire Alexander is going to leave on the table by taking a pay cut versus just insisting on being released? Or like that, who is that serving? What are we doing here? That doesn't make any sense. And to me, that's like, to be obsessed with that kind of thing. Oh, are they getting the right value on a reduced contract? Like, I'm not going to tell anybody how to fan, but like that, it does to me, for me, who tries to take a very analytical eye to all of this stuff. That's just not a fun way to follow the game for me. Like, I do want the Packers to sign, or any team to sign, smart contracts. But I have gotten, maybe I'm just getting old, but I've gotten to the point where I'm like, yeah, if Aaron Banks is good, like I kind of don't care. And who cares what Spotrac said Nate Hobbs was going to get? If he's the player that I think he can be, then he's more than worth the money that he was given. So who cares that, oh, this said you could have done this. You could have done it for $2 million. Who cares? It's not your money. Who cares? And it's not going to be the difference. In all likelihood, the Packers are not capped out. This is not 2021. It's not going to be the difference between them being able to bring in a key player who's going to help them make a title run and not. It's just, that's not going to be the reality. So let's put a pin in this again. And I think, frankly, unless it changes, unless we get a solid report that like, hey, this is deteriorated, he's actually being traded, or they're going to release him, I don't see any reason to bring this up again. Unless and until he signs a new deal that is a reduced figure or an extension or whatever it is, unless there's real something here We're just going to hang this to the side. Now, there is a player I have in mind when we're talking about adding a free agent that could help this team win. He was just released by the Carolina Panthers, and he can rush the passer. We'll talk about him next on Locked On Packers. As a small business owner, your work doesn't end when the clock hits 5. Your business is always on your mind, which means when it's time to hire, you need a partner that works just as hard as you do. That's where LinkedIn Jobs comes in. When you clock out, LinkedIn clocks in. LinkedIn makes it easy to post your job for free, share it with your network, and get qualified candidates all in one place. LinkedIn's new features can help you write your job description and then quickly get your job in front of the right people with deep candidate insights. And here's a pro tip. Add the hiring frame, #hiring, to your profile picture to double your reach to qualified candidates. No wonder 72% of small businesses say LinkedIn helps them find high-quality hires. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Thanks for making Locked On Packers your first listen. For your second listen, check out Locked On NFL Scouting. The NFL draft is over, but the roster moves and news never stop. Host Kyle Krabs and Joe Marino will make you the most informed NFL fan this offseason. Find Locked On NFL Scouting on YouTube or wherever you get podcasts. Jadeveon Clowney cut by the Carolina Panthers, and he was someone that I was advocating the Packers sign last year. And you can look at his track record and go, look, he's been a mercenary now for the entire second half of his career. For most of his career, it's been a year here, 2 years there. That's just the reality of the situation that he's found himself in. He is good. He would walk into Green Bay, at least as of today, as the second best defensive end on the Packers. He's still got juice. He's still got twitch. He still plays with power. He can still collapse the pocket. He can still chase. He still plays hard. Played hard in Carolina last year. And when you look at the numbers, Rashawn Gary had 3 more pressures than Jadeveon Clowney last year in 70 more pass rush reps. So almost identical production. It took Gary like 2 extra games worth of plays to get it. You could argue Clowney would come in and be immediately the best pass rusher on this team, or the most disruptive pass rusher on this team. Now there's got some similarities. Gary is more of a power rusher. Clowney is a power rusher, but also is a gap shooter, a slasher. Not going to bend the edge, but he is a disruptive player. Much like Rashawn Gary, though, he does not turn a lot of that production into sacks. It's a lot of pressures, but he wins. He wins quick. And for the Packers, I understand they did not, address it in the top of the draft. This is having your cake and eating it too. This to me is a no-brainer. And not only and we talked about this a little bit with Trey Hendrickson, who just the draft came and went, and we never talked about how nothing happened, and we still don't have a resolution there. But we talked about the value in making a move for Trey Hendrickson. There would be this tack-on benefit of keeping him away from the Lions, the Eagles, the Rams, teams with whom the Packers are directly competing in the NFC. Clowney is the same type of way. He'll be a lion by a lamb. Lions for lambs. He'll be a lion by Sunday if the Packers let him. The Packers have the money. Just go sign him. I know, obviously, it's not that easy. He may want to play somewhere else. He might not want to play in Green Bay. He might not want to play for Jeff Hafley. Who knows? I do think he's a scheme fit here. He is the kind of player that I think would accept a more limited role if that was what was given to him at this point in his career. You'd hope he'd want to win. But at the same time, last year he went to Carolina and took a 2-year deal to go to Carolina. I don't know that winning was the most important thing. It seems like dollars was the most important thing. And I don't even say that in a critical way. I do not begrudge him at all. When you get in car crashes for a living, playing a game, get your money, get every dollar. So do the Packers have the money to do that? They do. The question is, what is the price that makes sense? Depends on what the market is. I do think he's worth more to Green Bay than certainly other teams, but maybe not the Lions. They feel like their window is right now. Not the Rams. They feel like their window is right now, and they've got the older quarterback. So they may have more urgency to try and get a deal done like this, which means more dollar signs. Maybe Clowney would want a no-doubt starting role. I don't know that the Packers would be able to give that to them or would even want to give that to him given what they've invested in Lucas Van Ness. Does signing Jadeveon Clowney undercut everything you've said all offseason about believing in Lucas Van Ness? Now, I think you can sell this to the player and say, hey, Jadeveon, come in. You know, we got some guys we really like, but we'd really like you to come in and set a standard. Come in here, play hard, play physically, and we'll let the best guys play. If you're the best guy, you'll play. And if you're not, you'll play less. But you'll have an opportunity to come here and compete for a Super Bowl. And if you're the Packers, like, I think you can sell Clowney on the idea that if you come to Green Bay, you're a potential Super Bowl team. Detroit can make that same pitch. LA, better weather, better market, can make that same pitch. So I'm both advocating for this move from the Packers standpoint and also pointing out he has to want to come and the money has to be right because there are going to be other teams that want to sign him every year. It seems like every year he waits until July, August to sign, but then he ends up getting a nice deal and playing for 1 year or 2 years. And then he plays well and then goes somewhere else. And I don't know if he just wants to see the world or what exactly is going on there. I've never read anything that like, oh, he's not a good guy in the locker room or he didn't get along with this coach or, you know, he was a problem. I've never heard any of that. He's just kind of a mercenary. Like, okay, this is a job. I do my job. I go out there and I kick some ass and I'm not an elite player, but I'm a really good player when I'm out there and I'm a limited snap player at this point in my career. I'm not going to go out and play 85, 90% of snaps, but playing 55, 60% of snaps, I can be really good. That sounds good to Green Bay. You still have Lucas Van Ness, who you can give a bunch of snaps to. You can have Clowney and Van Ness on the field at the same time. It's another player for Van Ness to learn from, a veteran. And I'm talking about a real veteran, not Kingsley Enagbare. No disrespect to Kingsley Enagbare at all, but just different level of player. It means something different and different track record. Like he's, 2022 class. He's a year older, probably 2 years older than Lucas Van Ness. It's a different thing. Jadeveon Clowney was drafted in 2014. Until Green Bay, that would have been the last draft I had been at in person. It was the last draft in New York. My first draft. Pretty cool. And I remember making the case in Sports Illustrated that even though there were some quarterbacks you might like to draft number one overall, like he was the guy you should take. I still stand by that because your other options were like Teddy Bridgewater, Blake Bortles, and Johnny Manziel. So Clowney's probably the best player of any of those guys. But it didn't quite go the way you thought. So if Jaire comes back and you could get Jadeveon Clowney, man, this defense would be nasty. It'd be nasty. I like that. I like that. All right. Back next week. More rookie orientation coming your way. And a lot more to come as we move through the offseason. Remember, we are still here 5 days a week in May, or at least most of May. That may change a little bit in June, may change a little bit in July. We'll keep you posted on all of that. Follow me on all the social medias. Follow me on YouTube here. Not me, but the podcast. Follow the podcast on YouTube. Subscribe to the podcast wherever you get podcasts so you can stay locked on Packers.